Hey Wipp, this is my 3-book presentation. Starting out with the thesis. The thesis is the theme that is driven throughout each story is linked with curiosity, a distressing tone, and foreshadowing that drives each story's conclusion. First book that I read was The Triangle, The Fire That Changed America, written by David Vondrell. David was born in Kansas City. He was a communist. He has been a communist for the Washington Post since 2017. He's covered 60 stories before this one. The context is near World War I time. It's the context of when the incident happened, which was in 1911, and World War I started in 1914. So the content basically is about, the book started with David covering another story on a car explosion and how it set this building on fire right down the street of where this garment factory was lit on fire. It reminded people of, it killed multiple people in this explosion, this building, and it reminded the people of New York of the Triangle Fire that happened. So throughout the story, David investigates and researches and tries to come up with a conclusion on how and why the fire was started. He came up with one good observation on how it was started and who did it. The most upsetting thing to him was that he wasn't there when it happened. So he has so much info and biased opinions about what happened from other people, but he couldn't do it himself because obviously it was 50 years before he published this book. So throughout the book, he tells how the fire was started and what he thought of it. 146 people died in this fire. And out of 146 people, 126 were women. So many people throughout, like in the 1911, many people were misogynistic about how, like, why this fire started typically with based with working women, mostly working women. So women were kind of traumatized from that and kind of scared. And soon after, the women's civil rights were established. So the owners were blamed for this fire, for the causing of this fire. The fire exits were blocked off, and the fire exits were blocked off unless it was another woman who started the fire. The owners, it showed more evidence for the owners doing it than anyone else. Gas canteens, matches, lighters, and all flammable equipment were left behind and burnt to ash. That was also a piece of evidence, thinking it was these two owners, and both the owners were men. So it was kind of sketchy. The style, the tone was serious throughout the story. It showed a lot of imagery of people burnt to ash, and David explained how people would group up together in corners with nowhere to go other than death. David said he saw pictures and photographs that were hypothesized on what it looked like, and he explained how people were holding hands and in a praying position on their knees because they didn't want to get burned alive. Pathos and imagery go together well. Based on this quote, when the next bundle began falling, the onlookers realized that it was a human being, every look traumatized. So this quote explains what women were doing. They were jumping out of the window because they had nowhere to go. And you gotta remember, this was in New York, and New York is one of the most populated cities on earth. So everyone was out and about. This incident happened in 8 to 9 p.m. Everyone's out at night in New York City. It's night and day populated. So there are people jumping out and splatting and dying on the floor, on the cement floor right in front of other people. Imagery was shown, obviously, because people were like splatting on the floor. He explained that, and yeah, it was just a bad thought. Second book was Fast Food Nation by Eric Saucer. He was born in New York. He's an investigative reporter for over 10 years, and this book was the best-selling book of the year of 2001 when it was published. Context, it was written near 9/11, which is kind of a dark time. So just giving you a clue of when it was written. Content basically was about Eric finding and investigating why people keep eating fast food, even though they know it's an unhealthy food choice. Mostly he just got answers like it's convenient for them when they have to go to work, and for people who travel a lot, they just pick up some fast food. It's cheap, it's easy to go, but he saw that the diabetes rate of people went up from 2001 until present time now. So he tried figuring out like why people kept eating this. The style showed ethos, showed the dedication for the author to prove why fast food is not a healthy food choice for like an everyday life, because people would eat it every single day when they travel. Logos, he gives bad examples of what fast food companies will do to make money. That's kind of based off this quote. Behind it lies a simple explanation for why eating a hamburger can make you seriously ill. There's shit in the meat. Sorry, I said a cuss word. So this is basically saying that fast food places had ingredients in their food that were the same type of like thing, like chemical in poop, which is obviously not good for you. So yeah. Third book was Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. B.A. Paris was born in England but grew up in France. She also works with finance, and she does teach summer school. She has an album filled with different songs. She was a singer. She sings and writes music and stuff like that. Not really singing, but she like instrumental type of music. Yeah. Content. So it was about. So her main goal was to make sure women understand that they need to get to know a guy before they go start to fall in love with him. So it was about this girl and her sister that went on a vacation, and her sister has Down syndrome. Her name is Grace, and her sister's name is Millie. They met this guy. Grace met this guy named Jack. He was a very supporting man, hardworking man, made lots of money. Instantly fell in love with him on this vacation. They ended up meeting back up after and getting to know each other and dated, not really getting to know each other, but they dated immediately as soon as they got back. After about 3 to 4 months, Jack broke it to her that he was a psychopath and took both Grace and her sister Millie captive, and he knew that Millie, this is the best scenario for him, because he knew that Millie had Down syndrome and she didn't have the ability to get help or stuff like that, or understand why he was doing this. And so Jack pretty much had to focus on Grace the entire time, didn't have to worry about Millie. Style. Pathos is shown because everything about Jack is too good to be true, and there's always a catch. This quote right here, this quote right here, I can't help thinking it's a shame he's a sadistic bastard because he has wonderful manners. This kind of explains how pathos is shown, because it's in a very emotional get out from Grace, and how she attached herself to this guy even though that's not really how he was. Imagery was shown because it makes the audience emotionally sad and distressed for certain protagonists in the novel. This quote explains fear. He whispered, "There's nothing quite like it. I love how it looks, I love how it feels, I love how it smells, and I especially love the sound." He licks my cheek. I even love the taste. This shows awful imagery, and it kind of brings the tone down to a kind of like distress, and kind of like you feel bad for this girl. She can't really do anything. She fell in love with a guy that she didn't really know, and that the book wasn't, or like he didn't. The book, you can't judge a book by its cover, because that's what Grace did. She got herself into some deep crap. All right, next slide. This quote: "We look at other people and we think they're perfect, but we don't know what goes on behind their closed doors." This kind of also shows the tone of the book and how it's like suspenseful, and how people don't really know, like, or women need to know like what they're getting themselves into, unless like or until they find out after a certain amount of time that the guy they're dating is kind of crazy, and that they might be in danger. This is my visual. The first picture shows me with lighter, Joey's dad's lighter. It kind of compares to the first book, Triangle, the Fire That Changed America, with the garment factory burning down, and how like those women were kind of in distress and stuff. And obviously I'm a man, and that shows him behind the fire, and no one really like knew who it was. The second image shows the guy from The Shining. This is the psycho boyfriend. It compares the psycho boyfriend in my fictional novel. And the third image is me eating pizza. It compares the fast food nation, and yeah. My conclusion is the authors used foreshadowing, pathos, and ethos to build an emotional and serious story to educate on a suspenseful / curious point of view.